The bus stop smelled of wet asphalt and regret. Lynn hugged her suitcase close, trying not to cry. Every car that passed threw dirty water at her feet. She counted her money again, $67.35. It felt heavier than gold and lighter than hope. She whispered her own name just to hear a voice. No one answered. At dawn, she reached the old apartment building on Oak Street. She knocked on door 3B until her knuckles turned red. The door opened. Bamai stood there in her robe, eyes soft, voice calm. Come in, child. Lynn stepped inside, shaking. The smell of cinnamon and coffee wrapped around her. She sat on a couch covered with faded flowers. A quilt fell over her shoulders like forgiveness. Family trouble? Bamai asked. Lynn nodded, unable to speak. Tears rolled down her chin, silent and stubborn. Sometimes, Bamai said, we find family after we lose it. Lynn looked at the small apartment. One room, one old TV, one kind soul. It felt safer than the mansion she'd just left. That night, she couldn't sleep. The rain outside whispered stories of everything she'd lost. Her phone stayed dark, no messages, no calls. At 4:30 a.m., the alarm screamed. Bamai moved quietly, slippers brushing the floor. Up, little one, work doesn't wait. Lynn dressed in her diner uniform, still damp from the storm. She stared at herself in the mirror. The girl looking back was a stranger. Tired eyes, but alive. The diner smelled of bacon and bleach. Customers talked about the weather, not the girl refilling their coffee. Each tip she earned felt like a breath of air. She hid the money in a small notebook under her pillow. That night she wrote, Day 1, I survived. Days turned into weeks. She worked early shifts and studied at the library. The same bus driver saw her every morning. He never asked questions, just nodded. One night, Bamai found her asleep over an open math book. She placed a blanket on her shoulders. You're going to make it, she whispered. Lynn wanted to believe that. But some nights, doubt screamed louder than thunder. Still, she woke up. Still, she showed up. Her hands smelled like coffee and soap. Her feet ached. Her heart began to heal. When she passed her GED practice test, she cried. Not because of pride, but relief. Bamai baked a pie that night, burned at the edges, perfect anyway. You're not broken, she told Lynn. You're rebuilding. The next morning, Lynn pinned her GED exam date on the fridge. 30 days away. The red circle around it looked like a sunrise. She smiled for the first time in months. Not a big smile, but real. The kind that belongs to someone who knows pain. And still chooses to rise. The morning bus hissed to a stop at the corner. Lynn climbed aboard, holding her coffee tight. The same driver gave his quiet nod. She nodded back, half asleep, half determined. Outside, the city yawned awake under gray light. Inside, her reflection in the window looked older. Not in years, but in weight. At the diner, she tied her apron and smiled. The smile didn't always reach her eyes, but it worked. Customers came and went, faces blurring into routine. A man in a trucker cap studied her name tag. You're Lynn, right, from Maple Drive. She froze. He used to mow lawns in her neighborhood. He said he'd heard about her trouble. Lynn kept pouring his coffee, hands steady. He tipped her $5. You'll be fine, kid, he said. The kindness stung more than pity. After work, she walked past the old neighborhood. The houses gleamed like museum pieces. Her parents' home looked untouched, as if she never existed. A light shone in Nam's room upstairs. She stopped. For a second, she saw his shadow move behind the curtains. Then she kept walking. Each step away felt like a small act of defiance. At the library, she studied until closing. The security guard always waited, patient, before locking up. He never asked why she stayed so late. Books became her allies. They didn't judge, didn't ask, didn't leave. The GED exam came faster than she expected. She sat in a cold classroom, pencil shaking in her hand. Every answer felt like a war against fear. When it ended, she walked outside and cried quietly. No one saw. A week later, the envelope arrived. She held it like glass. Passed. One word. Enough to rebuild her world. Bam! Cried louder than Lynn did. She baked another pie, less burned this time. See, you did it, she said, hugging her tight. For the first time, Lynn believed it. She started saving for a small apartment. Every dollar went into a tin box under her bed. Her coworkers teased her for skipping outings. She just smiled. Dreams were expensive, but freedom was priceless. At night, she wrote letters to a future self. She promised better days, better rooms, better mornings. Weeks turned into months. The tin box grew heavier, her shoulders lighter. When she finally found a place she could afford, she cried again. A tiny studio, one window, one key. She signed the lease with trembling hands. This is mine, she whispered. That night, she sat on the bare floor, eating instant noodles. No chandeliers. No silk curtains. Just peace. The city hummed outside like a lullaby. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass. For the first time, she didn't see a runaway. She saw a survivor. A builder. Someone who had started with nothing and was learning how to rise. 10 years later, the city skyline looked different. Or maybe it was Lynn who had changed. She stood by the window of her small office, now hers alone. The sign outside read, Rise Studio. She started it with an old laptop and borrowed desk. The first client was a bakery that couldn't afford design fees. Lynn had said yes anyway. Now their posters hung in her lobby as reminders. Every wall whispered stories of second chances. Her employees worked quietly, focused, grateful. Most of them had come from broken starts like hers. One slept in her car before getting hired. Another had been a single mother left with nothing. Lynn saw herself in all of them. When the world closed doors, she built her own. The morning light touched the framed quote above her desk. Rise from what tried to break you. She smiled at the irony. Her phone buzzed with a new applicant. The name read My Nguyen. Single mom, 2 kids. No recent experience. Portfolio attached. Lynn clicked open the file. Sketches of posters, raw but full of soul. She scheduled the interview immediately. The next day, Mai arrived clutching a folder. Her hands trembled. I know my resume isn't strong, she said softly. Lynn studied her face and saw that same hunger. That same fear of failing again. She leaned forward. Show me what you love creating, Lynn said. Mai spread her designs on the desk. They weren't perfect, but they were honest. Lynn remembered her own first pitch at 23. The thrifted blazer. The shaking voice. The desperate hope. You're hired, Lynn said before the silence could grow. Mai blinked. Disbelief flooding her face. Really? Really, start Monday, we'll figure out the rest. After she left, Lynn sat back, exhaling. The office hummed around her. She looked at the framed photo on the shelf. Her younger self at a cluttered kitchen table. Beside her, Bamai holding a cup of coffee. The woman who taught her that kindness could rebuild lives. Lynn whispered a thank you to the memory. The years had been hard, but kind in their own way. She had traded pain for purpose, loneliness for leadership, and fear for faith. Outside, rain began to fall, soft and steady. Not a storm this time, just a reminder. She stood by the window, watching droplets trace the glass. In another life, she had been the girl in the rain. Now she was the shelter. The place someone could knock and find warmth. Her phone buzzed again. Another client, another project. Another chance to rise higher. She closed her eyes for a moment. Peace. The sound of rain no longer meant exile. It meant rebirth. And she knew, deep down, that the storm had made her strong enough to stand in the sun. The conference hall buzzed with polite chatter and flashing lights. Lynn stood near the coffee table, clutching her notebook. She wasn't used to events like this anymore. She preferred her quiet office, her small team, her peace. But tonight, she was a guest speaker. Her topic, design for change. When her turn ended, people clapped, polite but distant. Then a voice behind her said, "Great talk, simple and sharp." She turned. A man about her age, warm eyes, easy smile. "TU letter 1EA5N, he introduced, extending his hand. "Architect, I build things people can actually live in." She laughed. "Then we're in the same business," she said. They talked through the next 2 panels. Not about work, but about rain, food, and family. He listened the way few people did. Not to reply, but to understand. When the night ended, he walked her to her car. "Dinner next week?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Only if you don't wear that tie again." He grinned. One dinner turned into many. Months passed in quiet rhythms of laughter and small plans. He met Bamai first. She watched him with sharp eyes, then smiled. "He's kind," she whispered later. "That's enough." Lynn didn't realize how much she'd needed that approval. A year later, TU letter 1EA5N proposed in the simplest way. No crowd, no camera, just a ring and trembling hands. "I don't need perfect," he said. "I just need real." She said yes. Their wedding was small, just the people who mattered. Bamai baked the cake herself, uneven but sweet. Mr. Tan toasted them with shaking hands. "To the girl who taught us all how to rise," he said. Lynn cried quietly, hiding her face in TU letter 1EA5N's shoulder. Their home was nothing grand. 2 bedrooms, a messy garden, paint that needed fixing. But it was alive. They laughed while choosing curtain colors, argued over furniture. Every mark on the wall told a story. The night they finished painting, Lynn stood by the window. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the sound of rain. TU letter 1EA5N came up behind her, arms around her waist. "Feels like home now," he murmured. She nodded. Months later, she held their daughter for the first time. Tiny hands, loud cry, perfect heart. They named her N. "Peace," TU letter 1EA5N said, kissing Lynn's forehead. Bamai held the baby and smiled through tears. "You've built something beautiful," she said softly. "Not the company. Not the house. But the family." Lynn looked at the sleeping child and realized something new. The storm that once destroyed her had become her root. Every scar had shaped this piece. Every tear had led her here. She didn't need the old house anymore. She had built her own. And this time, no one could throw her out. The phone rang late on a Tuesday afternoon. Lynn almost ignored it. Unknown number. Too many calls, too little time. But something in her chest told her to pick up. A pause. Then a voice she hadn't heard in 15 years. "Lynn, it's Mom." The world tilted. Air left her lungs. "We need your help," her mother said. "Your brother, Nam, he's sick, it's cancer." Silence stretched between them like a wound. "How much?" Lynn asked finally. 300,000. The insurance won't cover everything. Lynn closed her eyes. 15 years without a single word, and now this. Her mother's voice trembled. "Please, Lynn, you're successful now. You can save him." The line went dead before Lynn could answer. That night, she couldn't eat. TU letter 1EA5N found her sitting on the floor, staring at the wall. "They called," she whispered. He didn't need to ask who. He just took her hand. "What will you do?" he asked gently. "I don't know," she said. Anger and pity battled inside her chest. She remembered that night in the rain. Her father's voice. The slammed door. The empty street. Now they wanted help. She couldn't decide if it was irony or justice. Days passed in silence. Her phone filled with voicemails. Her mother pleading. Her father calculating. Her brother saying nothing. Lynn drafted an email. She attached a proof of a wire transfer. $10,000. For Nam's health, she wrote. This doesn't change the past. She sent it before she could rethink. TU letter 1EA5 and read over her shoulder. That's fair, he said. But she didn't feel peace. That night, she dreamed of Nam's face at 13. The boy on the staircase, too afraid to speak. When she woke, the decision was already made. She opened her laptop and searched for cancer foundations. She found one that funded rare treatments. Anonymous donations accepted. Her hands didn't shake this time. She entered the amount. 100,000. She didn't sign her name. She just whispered, for him. The confirmation email arrived. Her chest ached, but lighter somehow. TU letter 1EA5 and saw the tears and held her close. You found a way to be kind, he said softly. But not weak. I didn't do it for them, Lynn said. I did it for the part of me that still remembers. A week later, her father sent an email full of numbers. Calculations, profits, moral obligations. She deleted it without reading twice. Nam texted once. Thank you, I understand. 3 words. No excuses, no apologies. It was enough. Outside, rain began to fall again. Gentle this time. Lynn stood by the window, listening. The same sound that once meant exile. Now it sounded like release. Maybe this was forgiveness. Not the kind you speak. The kind you live. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and rain. Lynn walked down the hallway, her steps uncertain. She wasn't sure why she came. Maybe to see if the boy from her memories was still there. Nam stood by the window, thin, pale, but alive. Their eyes met after 15 years of silence. He smiled weakly. Hi, sis. Her throat tightened. She wanted to be angry, but couldn't. How are you feeling? She asked quietly. Better, the treatment's working. He paused, hands trembling on the IV pole. I should have said something that night, he whispered. I was scared. You were 13, she said. But I wasn't brave either. They stood in silence, the hum of machines between them. When she left, he said softly, maybe coffee when this is over. Just us, she replied. He nodded. Back home, TU letter 1EA5 and waited in the garden. And was chasing butterflies near the flowers. Did it hurt? He asked. Yes, Lynn said, but not the way I thought. She looked at her daughter laughing, free from old ghosts. Pain can end if we stop feeding it, she murmured. Weeks passed. Nam recovered slowly. Her parents sold their house. The mansion with perfect shutters now belonged to strangers. Lynn read about it in the paper and felt nothing. Her peace was already built elsewhere. That summer, TU letter 1EA5 and came home holding an envelope. Inside were adoption papers for a little boy named Min. 2 years old. Big brown eyes. A quiet smile. Lynn felt tears before she could speak. He needs a home, TU letter 1EA5 and said softly. Her voice broke. Then let's give him one. The day Min arrived, the house filled with laughter and crayons. And hugged him instantly. Now we're 4, she said proudly. Lynn watched them play under the maple tree. She thought about the word family. It no longer meant pain. It meant choice. Weeks later, a letter arrived in her mother's handwriting. 3 pages of apology and request. Talks of rebuilding, of helping each other. Lynn folded it carefully and placed it in her desk. She didn't reply. Some stories don't need an ending. That night, she sat beside TU letter 1EA5 and by the window. The stars shimmered over their small garden. He asked, "Will you ever write back?" She shook her head. "I found peace when I stopped needing their approval." He nodded, pulling her close. Downstairs, Anne and Min were painting the kitchen wall. Tiny handprints marked the surface like new beginnings. Lynn laughed. "This is our legacy," she said. "Not blood, not wealth, but love chosen every single day." Months later, Rise Studio celebrated 10 years. Lynn stood on stage, microphone steady. "When I had nothing," she said, "I found people who believed in me." Now she would give that gift back. 5 scholarships each year. A foundation for young survivors. The crowd stood and clapped. She saw Bamai in the front row, eyes bright with pride. Outside, rain began to fall softly on the glass windows. Lynn closed her eyes and smiled. The storm no longer frightened her. It was just water, and she had learned how to bloom in it. The road curved past her old neighborhood. Lynn slowed the car, almost without meaning to. The house still stood there, freshly painted, door red. Children laughed on the lawn where she once cried. And pointed out the window. "Was that your house, Mommy?" Lynn looked, the memories flickering like an old film. "I lived there once," she said. "But a house isn't always a home." The light turned green, and she drove on. The city skyline shimmered in the afternoon sun. Her phone buzzed with messages from her team, from TU letter 1EA5N, from Joy. She smiled quietly, heart steady, calm. The past was no longer an anchor. It was a map that led her here. When she parked at home, Anne and Min ran to the door. Their laughter filled the air like music. Lynn lifted them both, spinning under the warm light. Inside, the walls glowed with messy handprints and bright drawings. This was her empire. Not built from revenge, but from love. She glanced at the rain starting outside. No fear. Only gratitude. The storm had given her wings. And she was still rising.